reading through it, and there was a sentence which caught our attention, and it said that you invested in a sustainable generation plan in 2017, and you invested $1 billion. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
And we were wondering, how did you actually implement that on a community and an individual level, which would affect the people throughout your product chain?
Yeah, so the Sustainable Generation Plan is, you're right, $1 billion investment in 3 areas. So one of the areas that we're focused is called Healthy Planet. And within Healthy Planet, we're focused on climate action, which is why we're here. We're focused on water stewardship, and we're focused on land use. And then the second pillar is what we call Thriving People. So that's looking at the intersection of environmental issues and social issues. And there we're focused on trying to improve incomes for smallholder farmers. As an agricultural company, we use the products that a lot of smallholder farmers produce all around the world, and we know that their incomes, in many cases, are far too low. So we're working to try to improve those incomes. We're also working on respecting human rights, so particularly issues like forced labor and child labor. And then last but not least, we're looking at how we can unlock opportunities for women. So again, if you think about our supply chain, sort of the unheralded heroes in agricultural supply chains are women, and we're trying to improve the livelihoods of women throughout our supply chains, but we're also looking at how women play a role in our direct operations. So with jobs like mine, how can we have more women in leadership positions? And that's the second pillar on the social side of things. And then we've got a third pillar within Sustainable in a Generation, which is looking at nourishing well-being. And that's what we make and how we sell it. So there, people know us for our chocolates and for fruity confections, but we also produce a lot of rice, we produce a lot of pet food, and we're looking at things like food safety and quality. We're looking at things like how we can continue to innovate and renovate our portfolio so that we're producing healthier foods. And then last but not least, we're looking at responsible marketing. So all of that goes into the Sustainable in a Generation plan. And with regard to the $1 billion, we sort of split it equally across those 3 areas over the next few years. Yeah.
So on the website, we've also read that you source all of your resources from sustainable and certified suppliers. So what exactly is the criteria for that?
So not everything from we're trying to source everything from sustainable suppliers. And to some extent, we work with certified suppliers where they exist. So certain supply chains, we source things that are certified. But the criteria that we look at are the things that I've just mentioned. So in some cases with a certification scheme, then those criteria are set. In other cases, like with cocoa, we've sourced some from certified sources, but what we found is that in some cases, some of the issues that we're trying to improve aren't yet tackled through certification. So in cocoa, for example, there are 3 big issues that we're continuing to work on, and not just Mars, but the industry is working on. So we're working to tackle child labor, we're working to halt deforestation, and again, on farmer incomes, we're trying to improve the incomes for smallholder farmers. So we have another initiative that's called Cocoa for Generations, where we're working to sort of augment certification with bespoke programs that Mars is putting together for suppliers that work on those 3 things.
And how do you ensure that throughout the process of you producing the products that it's sustainable at every step, or trying to be sustainable?
Yeah, so the things that we have the most control over are our direct operations. So that's sort of our factories and the places where I work, and so there, we can work on programs that are focused on women's empowerment, or that are focused on making sure that we're using more renewable electricity and being efficient with water use, and that's the place where we've probably got the most control. when we look within our supply chain, which is where most of our impacts are, so if you were to look at, and this is on our website as well, but if you were to look at our climate impact position paper, for example, what you would find is that the greenhouse gas emissions that come from our direct operations, 6%. So small, very sort of the distinct minority. If you look, though, in our supply chains, you'll find that our greenhouse gas emissions are about 75% of our overall emissions. So we've got more work to do in our supply chains. And that has to be done in a collaborative way, because we work with suppliers who generally work with middle folks, who generally work with more middle folks, who then go all the way to the farmer. So it is a big chain, and in some cases there are lots of links in that chain. And so what we can do is we can influence through procurement. So we buy a lot of stuff all around the world, and if we begin to talk to our suppliers about not just buying based on cost and based on quality specifications, which is sort of the way companies have been buying for years and years and years, and instead say we care about the cost, we care about the quality, but what we really also care about is how the things are made and the impacts that they have on the environment and the impacts that they have on society too.
So on the website, you also said there's a quote that said, by focusing on what is broken. So what exactly are the main challenges that you guys focus on, or that are trying to focus on?
Yeah. So what we're talking about, and again, this is all about sort of supply chain management. So our contention is that right now, agricultural supply chains are broken. And for all the reasons that we're talking about. So, we buy a lot of agricultural products, so do lots of other companies. But when you get down to the environmental impacts and the social impacts, there are too many negatives there. So what we're thinking about is how do we move beyond sort of thinking about purchase through commodities. So again, when you purchase a commodity, you're just purchasing a sort of a specified criteria. It's is it rice that has a certain price and a certain series of quality specifications? And that's all you care about. But if we try to move beyond commodities or change the nature of commodities, then we can begin to purchase not just based on quality and price, but again, based on a suite of social and environmental characteristics. And so when we talk about broken supply chains, what we're trying to do to fix them is to look for ways that we can work with our suppliers so that they are sort of influencing that chain in a way that improves human rights, unlocks opportunities for women, improves incomes for smallholder farmers, and then also, if you think about agricultural supply chains, thinks about ways that we can work with farmers that are smarter in terms of climate impacts and water impacts.
As well, on the website you saw that you are trying to improve the lives of 1 million people. And we're curious, how did you come up with the 1 million people, and who are these 1 million people? And why not more than 1 million people?
That's a very good and fair question. So we did sort of an assessment of how many smallholder farmers do we think we have in our supply chain, and which of them are the most vulnerable. And there are more than 1 million, but really when we looked at those that we thought were the most vulnerable, meaning the most vulnerable to forced labor or child labor, the most vulnerable to not having the right economic opportunities, we identified 1 million of them, and we thought, let's start there. Let's start by trying to improve the lives of the most vulnerable within our supply chains. But of course, if and when we get to 1 million, we won't stop there. The intention will be to move to the next 1 million.
Okay. So on your website it says that you are aiding, paraphrasing, you are helping with the progress against imminent threats, one of them being obesity. And we were curious how you would tackle that when so many of your products contain sugar.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things here. So one, people don't know about the diversity of our product portfolio. So people know us for our chocolates, and we're happy about that. But they don't know that we also produce Uncle Ben's Rice and the Kind Bar and Goodness Knows Bar and a whole bunch of other foods that are more, they're not necessarily treats. They are part of our day-to-day diets. But on the treats, a couple of things. I mean, one, we market them as treats. We talk about them as treats. We never have tried to pretend that, your diet depends on having a Snickers bar or a bag of M&Ms. And we also market them with a portion size that is under 250 calories. So we're trying to help consumers recognize that, again, if you want to have a piece of candy, that it should be a treat and it should be a small portion of your overall allowance for calories. So we've got packages that are labeled on the front so that the consumer can see what he or she is purchasing and can quickly see the calorie count and can make an informed choice. When we look at sort of where we are moving in terms of product innovation, we're moving toward healthier products. So, if you were to talk to our innovators, what you would find them working on and excited about are really sort of driving toward what's going to be the next healthy snack. Again, not moving away from the things that we've been producing for years and years and years, but putting them in a place that is focused on treats and then working to develop products that are part of a healthy portfolio.
So you also saw in the video that Mars is trying to stop all greenhouse gas reduction in factories by 2040, I think. So what is the main strategy that you guys have to achieve this goal, and has there been any challenges or long term?
Yeah. So, we're trying to use 100% renewable electricity within our direct operations by 2040. And there are two ways that we're going about that. So first, we're looking at renewable electricity, and there we're making great progress. So in the U.S., in the U.K., in Mexico, and soon in Australia, 100% of our direct operations will use the equivalent of all renewable electricity. So that's great. And we've got deals that we're working out at the country level. These are long-term power purchase agreements that I think we feel very good about our ability to move forward with renewable electricity. But the part that's challenging is what we call renewable thermal. And that's what goes into, say, the heating and the cooling of a building like this or any of our factories. It's a different kind of energy source. And it's more difficult to use renewable thermal. So we've been working with people like WWF and the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance and others on a renewable thermal coalition that we think is going to help to unlock some solutions to allow us to use more renewable thermal. So I think the opportunities that we're seeing are with renewable electricity and long-term power purchase agreements at the country level. I think the challenge is with renewable thermal.
And following from that, from a business perspective, how has becoming more sustainable helped or benefited Mars in any way?
Yeah, we see lots of benefits. So number one, it helps us to reduce risks. So if you think again about sort of supply chains and climate change, for example, climate change is making it more difficult for us to source in certain areas. It's making it more difficult for farmers to have reliable yields. And so, if we're able to help to tackle something like climate change or water stress, it's going to eliminate risks from within our supply chain. So that's one way that we sort of look at the benefits of this work. Second, though, is cost. So we talked about renewable electricity and these long-term power purchase agreements that we're making. And just about every one of them, we're able to make a deal where we're saving money versus the traditional fossil fuel sourced energy. So we're saving costs is a second benefit. Third one is we think that it's helping us to recruit better talent. So we think that people today want to work for companies that have values, that care about the environment, that care about their impact on community and on people. And when we talk to our own associates, our own employees, they tell us that they're really proud of this work. And when we go out to interview people who are coming out of college or graduate school, it's remarkable because they know so much about this agenda. So they've done their research, they've got great questions like you do, and they use our environmental and our social ambitions and progress to make some decisions about where they may want to work. And then last but not least, I think in terms of where we see this agenda offering up opportunities is the connection with consumers. So I think more and more of today's consumer is buying things based on whether or not they feel like the company that's producing it is a good company and the way that they produce it is good for the environment and good for people. So our sense is that as our brands get more active in communicating about all of this, that it'll be a good opportunity for us to connect with consumers too.
And one final question going back to the supply chain.
Yeah.
So I think what you said about trying to increase the positives that come from agriculture, cultivation is one of the main goals that you guys have. And so now, in growing years, there has been concern over the use of palm oil. And as a confectionery company, that is definitely something that is a main ingredient in most of your products. So how has Mars tried to promote sustainability on that front? Or do you guys have plans to do so? Because it's quite a complex issue, I think.
It is, for sure. So a couple of things. So one of the issues with palm oil, and not just palm oil, but one of the issues in agricultural supply chains is oftentimes we don't know where the materials are coming from and how they are sourced. So one of the things that we're doing in the palm oil supply chain is earlier this year we put our list of about 1,600 palm oil suppliers out. So it's on our website. That means anybody that is curious about who we source from can go to that list and can see quite openly and quite transparently who we source from. What that means is that today there are organizations, NGOs, Mighty Earth, Greenpeace, the list goes on, who are studying that list and who are coming back to us and they're saying, gosh, we've got concerns about the way that this or that palm oil supplier is either working against goals related to deforestation or things related to human rights violations. So it provides a feedback loop, and we then are able to take the information that they share with us, compare it against what we believe and what we know, and then work more directly with our suppliers to try to cut out the bad actors. And we're doing that. And I think for us on palm, where we see an opportunity is, so today we source from 1,600 palm oil suppliers. That's a lot of suppliers. It's hard to try to manage 1,600 suppliers. And particularly because we source a tiny fraction of the world's palm oil, about 1%. So in the future, not so distant future, our plan is to reduce the number of suppliers, probably quite significantly, so that we can build longer-term relationships with them, and so that those longer-term relationships can really focus on how we can work together on issues like deforestation, on issues like human rights violations and things like that. So we're not there yet, and certainly I spend a lot of time talking about palm oil and talking with our palm oil suppliers. And I think we, just like everybody else that is sort of in the business of sourcing palm oil, has more work to do there.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.